All right, recording. This is on. Test, test, test. Jon Grover, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. I'm excited to have you on because you've had some really unique experiences that I wanted to cover in preparation for something I'm excited we're doing, where I want to help make 2020 not the year of murder hornets or coronavirus or all of those things, but rather make it the year of the entrepreneur, right? And so in an effort to help people prepare to enter the challenge that we're launching soon called Launch a Business in 3 Days, I thought it would be really good to talk to someone who has some great experience in starting products at a young age within a company, and how to do all that precursory work to actually launching.
Great. Sounds good. I love the I love the mission of being able to turn 2020 into something positive. Whenever there is a pandemic or something horrible that happens in your life or in the macro economy, there's always opportunity there. And those that are successful are able to find those opportunities when everyone else is scared about taking a step forward or taking a risk. And so this is a great opportunity for a lot of people to make that move.
Yeah, I mean, you think of our last economic downturn and all of the wonderful companies that came out of 2008, or even just ideas, crowdsourcing. And so I've said it before and I'll say it again. I'm excited. I wish I could fast forward 10 years and see what just all of the awesomeness that comes out of this, because like you said, with new problems come new opportunities. But so I'd like to back up and maybe have you introduce yourself and your background, your experience at tech companies, especially in the startup phase, and then your experience within product as well, and how to design a product, service, or offering.
Okay, sounds good. So to go way back, feels like forever ago, I started my career at a little company called Mindshare. I was about the 10th employee, and we were pre-revenue. I started part-time. I was going to college at BYU. Because of my experience and my exposure to this tech company Mindshare that I was working at, I decided to go into information systems. I really loved the balance of business and tech in the degree. When I graduated from that the information systems program, I continued to work at Mindshare. I started as the first product manager, and I built the product team there. I had an opportunity later in my career there. We actually rebranded to a company that some may know, in Moment. And I took over the UX team. And so I had a good opportunity to learn from all those that I worked with about good UX practices and good UX research. I was definitely the dumbest person in the room when we were doing UX reviews and validation, but I learned a lot from those I worked with at In Moment. So I was there for about 13 years, and then I moved over to a company called Grow, and learned a lot from the product leader there. His name's Richard Tripp, and has an incredible product process if you ever are in need of a very innovative product process. And so I learned a lot from him and those there. And then I made another jump to a small company called WeWork. I guess it's, shouldn't say it's a small company. It was a pretty large move, and had the opportunity to work with a lot of people that worked at incredible Silicon Valley successes, from Twitter to Google to Amazon to Spotify, and had an opportunity to kind of learn the Silicon Valley way of building products and ideating. And then I now most recently I'm at a company called HaloSite, which is a startup pre-revenue. And and I am the leading product. I shouldn't say lead because I am product. I am the only one in product. So it's been fun to go from big company, small company, big company, back to a small company. There's definitely pros and cons. One thing I've been doing lately is There's a difference between scrappy and crappy process. And when you're a small startup company or just starting out, it's important not to be crappy and to be scrappy. And so what I've done to protect myself from entering that crappy process realm is to put a board of directors that I know of people I've worked with in the past that I trust that will give me candid feedback. And so I will work with them and I talk to them about my process and what I'm doing, and they'll call me out and say, you're missing it here. You really need to focus on here. Or, yeah, I know this is, the last thing on your list, but you need to beef it up on this process. And so that's been great to make sure that I don't get too crappy and I stay scrappy.
I like that. The rhyming helps too.
Yeah, it does. So there's my intro. I don't know if you want me to go into the second question you had for me, which was kind of the process of building products and ideation.
No, yeah, I'd love to hear that, especially because when you talk about your experience with two pre-revenue companies, right? If someone's starting a business, that's where they're at.
Right.
And it's exciting and it's fun and it's scary all at the same time. And there are some things that, like, you have your idea and to some extent it's like your lifeblood, it's your passion. But there are things that you need to remember to keep in mind as you're developing so that you make sure that you really do have a good product market fit, or that there's market opportunity there for it, that the demand is there, or that you're doing it differently enough than someone else may already be doing it. So I'd love you to dive into that in those beginning stages, how you approached that.
Yeah, so let me make sure I understand the question. So you're really, as you are going into a new idea, making sure that you have an idea that is going to be profitable. Mm-hmm. It's not just something that you're passionate about. Yep. And also making sure that you continue to remember why you're building the product. Is that fair?
Yeah.
Okay. So it's a great question, because I think there's I talk to a lot of the UX designers I work with, and as I watched the UX designers I worked with, I saw some that became very possessive of their ideas. They'd walk into a validation meeting where they've created a mock-up and they had an idea and they pitched it with, as much passion, and it was almost it's their baby, it's their child.
Yeah.
And you don't want to give them negative feedback because you can just see that you're going to destroy them a little bit and all of the passion. And then they can give up on the idea and be like, oh crap, it's a crappy idea.
Yeah, so, it's kind of like when you're selling a house and you're like, oh, my house is totally worth this much. But you've got that emotional attachment to this home that you've built. Right. And then someone lowballs you and you're like, forget that.
Right. And so, I saw that over and over and over again. And so I taught and coached a lot of my UX designers, and product managers fall into this as well. And, entrepreneurs, of course, my background is very much being an intrapreneur inside of an organization. So but a lot of this transfers over to an entrepreneur, is to make sure that understand that an entrepreneur, a product, UX designer, whoever it is, your job responsibility is not to come up with the best idea. Your job responsibility is to facilitate that the best ideas surface and are prioritized and worked on, and you execute on those. And so that looks very different when you think about an organization. So you look at an organization that has a product UX team. There are those that believe that the world of, like, if you read kind of Apple's beginnings, that there was a room that only Johnny Ives and Steve Jobs were able to enter, and a few others, right? And all of the great ideas that Apple came up with were in that room. That's one way to design product. As I've found, the more effective way is making sure that you're using all of the resources in your organization and outside of your organization to come up with the best idea. And that idea might come from an engineer, it might come from a finance person, a customer success rep, a customer, right? That's of course the number one. Everyone says talk to your customers. They've got problems. that they don't always have the best idea on how to solve the problem, but they have problems, and they're
Well,
going to give you all those problems.
and they tend to articulate the problem in a different way that you would, that helps
Absolutely.
you see it through a different lens.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that it even is hard to have them articulate it. That's why I think ethnographic research is so valuable. An example of that is when I was working at in Moment, we went and visited the Hertz location at the airport, and Hertz was a customer of ours, and we went into their back room and we found one of our reports, and we did VOC surveys for them. We found one of our reports that was posted on the wall and literally taped together pieces of paper all the way to the ground.
Oh boy.
And as a product manager, you just have this like, oh wow, like what are we doing to them? And I walked over and I found that the margins for our comments was just so narrow. Like it was a ton of white space, and it was just, they wanted to get all the comments. But what that communicated to me is that they wanted to get those comments in the hands of their employees. The customer comments were so valuable that they went to lengths that we didn't design for them to print this report out. But no one probably would have communicated that as an issue. They would have, they solved the problem, right? It wasn't elegant, it wasn't beautiful, but they solved their problem. So we actually went back and we were able to work with the engineering team to create a report that worked for them. And a lot of companies ended up adopting that and solving that problem. And so it's not just talking to your customers, but it's actually going and experiencing and feeling empathy for your customer or your potential customer. I think it's always I've had many entrepreneurs try to pitch me ideas and say, hey, I've got an idea, and I'm always open to listen to ideas, but I'm always interested to know why they want to solve the idea. Because when I found the most successful people are the ones that are so intimately aware of problems in an industry that they've thought about those problems, they've lived those problems, they have incredible amount of empathy that they can then see what a great solution will be. Whereas if someone enters an industry they've never, like I'm not a golfer, if I went and tried to go create a golf product, I would have to do a ton of research. I'd have to talk to a ton of people that play golf way more than I do in order to build a product that would be successful in that market. And so I would say my first kind of piece of advice to answer your question, this is a long-winded answer, would be know who you're solving the problem for, the customer and those that really feel the pain that you're trying to solve. Get to know them really well, and you will do everything you can to solve those problems. It's just saving them a few minutes of their day. What you will find is the customers will come back to you and communicate such gratitude that will be your driving force. And it won't be that you have a cool idea that you think is cool. It will be that you're solving a problem that people are just loving and they use in their daily life.
Right. And it's not just like let's say you're this person who is really passionate about this thing. You are still only one data point.
Right.
And so understanding that, like, okay, if I can get this product or this idea or this service, whatever it might be, in the hands of someone else and observe them trying to utilize it. I actually think of a movie I love called Joy. I don't know if you've seen it. She is a working mom, and she's just this idea woman, but just kind of has always been suppressed in her life. And she works so hard and creates what I think so many of us are familiar with, the like self-ringing mop. She works on prototyping it, building molds, sewing the fabric together and everything. And then she takes it to like HSN, the Home Shopping Network, and they have someone else try to sell it, and he botches it. And they don't really talk about this in the story, and I wonder to what extent this happened in real life, of like her seeing him interact with this thing that she'd spent months of her life researching, building, and him not being able to properly use it. But like that is such an invaluable data point to do that with so many people, right? If it's a physical product, take that, or if it's software on a computer, whatever it might be, but give it to someone, no instructions, and just observe. and
Right.
you will learn so much.
Yep. Absolutely. Things that you thought were intuitive or would
Yeah.
solve a problem, you find very quickly they don't care about it at all. And
Yeah.
and that you got to swallow your ego, and you have to remember you're solving problems, you're not bringing great ideas. And this is just one more data point, and you humbly go back and you might pull that feature out and replace it with a new one, or figure out a better solution. Casey, you still there? Oh,
Sorry.
there we go.
Okay. Rewind.
Where did I lose you?
Pretty much just as you were jumping back in.
Okay. Let's see. You were asking about, you were talking about how, we go and start
Why?
validating with covers. Yep. And once you start validating, you start realizing that your ideas are maybe not as cool as you thought they were. They're not solving the problem. They're not intuitive. And so you really need to make sure that you understand how to not only validate, but be humble about the feedback and be willing to say, yep, I was wrong. And that's okay. And it's better that I iterate now and I adjust now than down the road, especially when in your idea phase. You have such a great opportunity early stage idea to iterate and pivot. I mean, there's so many things that I out there that didn't start out solving a problem, and then they ended up solving that problem later, or a different problem. And so I think that's a valuable thing to realize and humility is a big piece of being an entrepreneur.
Yeah, that flexibility. And I think that goes back to something that I'd like to talk to you about. Is like, how do you keep your emotions or ego in check, or not in check, but just tied to the right thing, tied to your why instead of your what, or even your who, right? Like a classic entrepreneur book that now I'm blanking on, Built to Last, there we go, talks a lot about when establishing a company that is built to last, a good foundation to have is more the who and the culture within the company, as opposed to what it is you're going to end up building or offering. Because when you have that as a foundation, and if you need to pivot, you're not emotionally tied to this thing that either isn't working anymore, or like you think of like things that just change because of time, like 9/11, and how people used to carry on pocket knives all the time, and that's not a thing anymore. And so if you're offering pocket knives, maybe you think about pivoting a bit. But
Yeah. No, I'll tell you two things there. I think one is something that we are doing very diligently and we're focusing on is making sure that we understand our principles. Because a principle-based life is such an easier life to live. You don't have to make a decision day in and day out. You get to look at your life and say, because I have these principles and I live by them, a lot of my decisions are made for me, and I can then focus my time and attention and my energy somewhere else versus trying to remake those decisions. So in business, it's the same thing. If you have solid principles that you review often and that you're willing to iterate on, because I don't think it should be, carved into stone tablets. I think it should be always evolving as your company grows. Is your culture will feed off of that. Your customer experience will feed off of that. The customer experience you provide, the product you build, and the features you decide to work on, all build off those principles that you have established as a company. And so I think that is key to making sure that you are rooted into the why and the who, because you're building a company not just for your customers, but you're building a company for your employees as well. Because happy employees equal happy customers. And if your employees aren't happy and they don't believe that you are building a business to solve an actual problem, then you won't. Then they won't be passionate about it. They're just earning a paycheck. And I think that's like, okay.
I was just gonna say, you're talking a lot as if you've read Principles by Ray Dalio. Yeah.
I actually haven't.
Oh, it's really good. If you listeners, if they haven't listened to it, check it out. Because he does just that. Like, it was really funny how much I felt like you were following his outline. He presents a list of principles that he followed in his nation-renowned consulting business, but he opens the book with personal principles first. And so if you need ideas of principles and things to root yourself in or your company in, that is a really good resource.
Yeah, and I would follow that up with it. Principles and vision are two things that we talk about a lot as entrepreneurs and in businesses. But I think it's also very critical to understand the frameworks around breaking down a vision or principles into manageable chunks for everyone to be able to understand and work with. And so the two big ones are OKRs and D2MOM, right? I've used both of them in different companies. I won't go deep into them. You can go do Google search and find out way more than I can give in this podcast. But what I love about them is it takes a high level, kind of pithy statement or a bulleted list of principles and breaks it down into what do we do on a yearly basis? What do we do on a quarterly basis? What do we do on a weekly basis or a daily basis in order to make sure that we're reaching our vision or that our principles are being maintained in everything we do? And so that's I think a really key point, because a lot of times people write a vision and put it on the wall, and that's not what a vision should be doing. It should be guiding you in your daily life.
Well, at a company I worked at earlier in my career, when we set our OKRs for the quarter, they were always tied to one of our team or our company principles. So you knew exactly how it related to the DNA of the company, pretty much.
Right. Absolutely. So.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's a good reminder. Oh, go for it.
Yeah. So my second point that I wanted to really hit on really quickly was I think it's very critical to make sure that you have that you understand, and we talked a little about this, you understand the disease that your cure is solving. And I know in the world of COVID-19, that's a bad analogy, but if you think about it, a lot of times people bring a cure and look for a disease. And you can start a business that way, and you can be very successful, but you risk being so married to the cure that the disease is missed, and you won't find profitability in that. And so make sure that either you start from the disease and go to the cure, or if you go back, make sure that you clearly define that disease you're looking to solve. Sorry, bad analogy. I'll jump off that analogy.
No, I think that's a great analogy, because I'm going to add to it, because sometimes you can end up trying to solve for the symptoms and not the disease, right?
Yeah.
And so you get caught up in things that, if we're going to go with COVID, right? Here, take a cough drop. You've got a cough? Take a cough drop. It's like, that's great, but that's not ultimately curing this long-term thing that I have.
Well, I'm laughing because I look at what happened in early days of COVID, and everyone was buying toilet paper. And it's like, as far as I know, this is not a digestive problem. Like, I don't think that it's going to affect me, that I'm going to need more toilet paper. But if you looked at the society from, let's say, an outsider's perspective, you're like, this disease must cause some.
If you're going to do correlation instead of causation.
Right. The toilet paper. I mean, don't get me wrong, hand sanitizer and stuff like that was, but like, early days, we weren't buying masks. No one was going for masks. No one was looking at it. But it is a respiratory transmission, and so it was funny to see that. And I think that is a wonderful addition to that analogy. I'm going to steal it. Of make sure you don't solve for the symptoms, but you actually solve for the disease.
Yeah. So, okay, we've talked about making sure that we remain more closely knit to our why and our passion here, as opposed to our end product. How do you then maintain a cycle of ideation?
It is a great question, and I think it's sorry about that. I didn't realize that was my phone. I think that it's important actually before to say that ideation shouldn't always happen. There's a point where you need to turn ideation off. A process that I follow that I really like is called the double diamond process, and you once again Google it. The visual will do a lot better, but it's pretty much two diamonds.
We'll include a visual in the blog too.
Yeah, so it's a double diamond process. So you have an open diamond, so it's a divergent thinking, and that's where ideation should happen. And the first diamond is all around the problem, or if you will, the disease, going back to our analogy. You diverge and you look at all the different diseases you could solve, right? And there's no restrictions, there's no like, hey, this isn't gonna, be profitable, this is difficult, none of that. It's just, what diseases could I solve? And then to complete that first diamond, you converge on the one that maybe is in your realm of expertise, or one that's viable, or one that the market, because of the opportunity of like a pandemic or something, has opened up and there's new opportunity there. You use all of that information of your knowledge and the validation, you're working with customers and your team, and you say, let's converge on this one. That's the first diamond. And so ideation should stop at some point when you need to start converging. Right. I think a lot of entrepreneurs are innovative and they're idea generators, but they're not synthesizers. And so you have to find generators and synthesizers. There's actually an interesting, a lot of people can't be both. Yeah. So you need to identify what you are and then find someone to partner with that actually complements you. It's really interesting. You look at the Steve Wozniak and Steve Jobs, right? They complemented each other, right? And a lot of times you see that person that complements on a generator. Anyway, the second diamond is all about the solution, right? Where you diverge on how you can solve that problem, and then you converge on the way to solve it, right?
I love that. Yes.
So that double diamond process is a very popular UX process, but it can be very, very useful for entrepreneurs as well in terms of looking for the problem and making sure you do the problem and the solution.
Yeah, because like we can riff all day, and the great thing about ideas is that the more ideas you have, the more ideas that come. But you can be almost have like analysis paralysis or decision fatigue. There are so many names for it given the actual scenario the concept is being applied to, where you don't move forward because you're just spinning off trying to find the right idea. But I like that. Find this one, converge on it, but then you start the process again, but focused on that single idea. And then you kind of peel back the layers of how you can really execute and deliver a white gloved experience there.
Yeah, I mean, I think the difference between a wantrepreneur and an entrepreneur.
Wantrepreneur. I've never heard that.
Oh, I don't believe I coined it. I've heard that from other places. But
I love it.
The difference between a wantrepreneur and entrepreneur is execution. There's way too many people out there like, oh, I love this idea, and I talk to them 5 years later, and they still are focused on that one idea. And it's like at some point you got to pull the trigger. Sometimes you got to burn your boat, right? You need to leave a safe company and you need to jump off and take that risk. Don't get me wrong. I am an intrapreneur. I am not an entrepreneur. So I've never jumped off and done my own thing. I've always worked with others and that had ideas. And that's in some ways because I've looked at myself and I see myself as a synthesizer and not a generator. And so I find great generators to work with.
Got it. Yeah, I mean, that example of burning the boats is a really good one. Because safety can be a big hindrance. The interesting thing too, though, is like today with the unemployment rates we've seen, some people have been forced. The boats were burned for them. Yeah. And that's why I wanted to really like jump into this and give people tools and resources to help them either take any ideas they have or inspire them to start having ideas. and to give them the processes, tools, resources to move forward with that, to do what they need to do to understand, okay, is this the right idea to move forward with, or do I need to find another?
Yeah. Question, because you kind of asked that question of how do people find the idea? Do you want me to go down that road?
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about how you land on the right idea. I've got a few books that I'm even currently trying to explore, but I would love to hear what opinions you have, or even what resources you would recommend.
In order to find the right idea that you should focus on.
Yeah.
Well, I think you've got to throw yourself into something that you're passionate about. Don't try to build a business around something you're not passionate about. And if you don't have something like that, find something that you're passionate about. It reminds me of a story of a gentleman that was wanting to make something of himself. And I'm gonna botch this and someone's gonna be like, oh, I know what this story is, but and a wise man told him and said, you know, what are you passionate? What do you do on a daily basis? He's like, well, I'm a chef at a kitchen. Yeah. Do you know what I'm talking about? And he's sitting on and he says, well, what do you do during your breaks? And he says, I sit on the porch out back. He says, what do you sit on? And he says, well, bricks. And he said, well, write a book about the bricks. And he said, really? I mean, I'm going to write half a page. But he got passionate about how bricks were made and the history of bricks. And he wrote a whole book about that. And it was successful. And I actually don't even know if this is a true story. This is just a story we tell ourselves. And then the wise man told him, well, what's under the bricks? And he said ants. And he wrote a whole book about ants. And so it shows you that it doesn't matter what the topic is. You can be very passionate about any topic and throw yourself into it and become the expert around that topic. And what I've found is I've worked at a lot of companies where when people say, well, what do you do for a living? I kind of make things up. It's like, for example, at my current company, Halo Site, they say, well, what do you do for a living? I tell them I teach a computer how to read at a 5th grade level. And,
I love that.
But that's what I'm passionate about. And it's amazing the meetings I'm in all day, every day, we're talking about sentence structures and verbs and nouns and all of these things. And it's something I never thought I'd be passionate about. But when I threw myself into it, I find it so fun to talk about and uncover new ways of analyzing sentences and things like that. And I mean, the company before this, what did I do? I worked at, making meetings more effective and at WeWork. And we built technology to get people to start their meetings on time, end their meetings on time, and make them effective. I mean, it seems like something super boring, right? But I loved it. I had so much fun building products to solve that need. And so.
Yeah, and it goes to show too, like how seemingly small or inconsequential a problem or need can be. Like you said, like helping people start their meetings on time. It's so funny because it's like so common. Everybody has shown up late to a meeting, even if it's been a digital one and they haven't had to drive anywhere.
Right.
Which just shows like, okay, well, what's the real problem here? Is it that we're bad time managers? But it is a clear problem because the moment our time is our greatest resource. Anyway, I loved that. That was kind of a cool example of something that might be a problem or need that is easy to gloss over.
Yeah. And I think too often you look at the problems, the sexy problems to solve.
Yes.
Right? No one's graduating from Harvard Business School wanting to solve some problems. They all want to create the new social network, right? They want to be the next Facebook. They want to, compete with Tesla and Apple, right? I mean, they solving the big macro problems takes a lot of money, takes a lot of time, and good luck, I would say, anyone that wants to solve those problems. But I remember an entrepreneur I met and I discussed, and he ran a quilting company. And he was my age, and I would never have guessed that you could create a very successful multi-million-dollar company off of quilts. but he revolutionized the world of quilts. And they and it he's actually the one that made this statement. He said, "It's great because no one is coming after us. No one's graduating from Harvard Business School looking to compete with me against on quilts."
Yeah.
And so, but it's a problem that he solved in such a. I actually need to tell you the business model of this. This is the Missouri Quilting Company, and
Okay.
they have a small town in the middle of Missouri, that has become the Sturgis. If you're a motorcyclist, Sturgis is a kind of the mecca of Sturgis is the mecca for motorcyclists. I think it's Hamilton, Missouri. Hamilton, Missouri is the mecca for quilters. And I've actually visited there, and it is like Radiator Springs. I mean, it's like one main street, and there are 10 quilting stores in this one town, all owned by Missouri Quilting Company. Get that. And each store is different fabrics and different themed, right? So if you want a sports fabric, there's one store. If you want, kind of antique fabrics, there's another one, right? And so, and then there's other things that they've built around this infrastructure. They own the restaurant in town. There's one store that's all dedicated to the men, leather seats, sports being played, and so and they own the hotel. And so what happens is they bus these women in that love quilting, and it's like a Disneyland experience. And the women go and buy all the fabric, the men go, watch sports and talk, and so they have this whole experience around quilting. But who would have ever thought that you could do that with something as basic as quilting? And they have an online presence and an e-commerce presence, and now that they've had an experience with this Missouri Quilting Company, they can now go buy from their website. And so it's such an incredible model that you would never have thought you could create a very, very successful business off of, but they did.
Yeah, I love it. I don't know why I hesitate to say this, but I've always loved the phrase, "If you build it, they will come." But I want to qualify it with, like, if you build it right, they will come.
Right.
Because I also think of, like, I love cooking. I love food. Chef's Table is a series on Netflix, highlights several restaurants all over the world, some of which, like, there's one in Sweden that literally middle of nowhere, and you have to stay there overnight. You have your, like, 3-hour long dinner, and then you go up and stay in a room because it's so far removed. But he built it right, and people do come. People reserve the tables and pay exorbitant amount of money for this dinner. But a part of building it right is also making sure to get in front of the people that appeals to, right? Like, knowing your market, your target audience, and understanding the experience that they want. And I think that's maybe another important thing to call out, is that we really are in an experience economy, where things are not necessarily being compared just across the industry or market you're in. You're going to be compared to, you as a quilting shop, you're going to be compared to Amazon. You're going to be, in a day and age where we're used to 2-day deliveries, suggested products to buy based on former purchases, those expectations are being applied to you as well.
Yeah, no, that's a great example. I remember working with a great company where we were tracking their voice of the customer, and we were putting benchmarks together for them. And we said, okay, here are some other companies that are in your industry. And they said, no. We don't want to be compared against anyone in our industry. We want to be compared to the best. And so on our benchmark, we want the Nike, we want Tiffany's, we want Apple, we want, these great companies that have honed their systems and their processes to provide incredible product and customer experience. That's who they wanted to be compared against. And that's a tall order, but I think you're spot on in saying that our world has shrunk because of what we have access to. and
Yeah.
exposure to, and we are being compared to those companies for sure.
Yeah. So I mean, I like this call out too, because I think when we're talking about doing the heavy lifting before launching a business, that these are all very good things to keep in mind, to understand that, like, yes, do your market research, but don't forget that cross industry research of seeing, like, okay, well, how is someone even outside of my industry killing it, and what about it is really taking it to the next level? Can I incorporate some of those ideas, some of those points of execution?
Yeah, I love this kind of thought that you're kind of bringing up, and it's something I've talked to a lot of people about. There's really not new ideas.
No. Yeah.
Everything's a remix, right?
Yeah.
And so I have always found that, and I say this, and those that know me know I say this probably on a weekly basis: good artists borrow, great artists steal. And that, for those that are artists, might be really offended by that. But the point is find inspiration and honor those around you, and those in different industries. Here's a great example of a product we built where we were trying to encourage people to leave longer comments, and we found inspiration in password strength meters, and we utilized something like a password strength meter to encourage people, and it was successfully able to increase people to leave longer comments in surveys. And we gamified it in a lot of ways, and that is an example of borrowing from another UI or another thing that works and bringing it over. And I think there's a lot of opportunity there. And too often people feel like they have to come up with the idea from scratch.
Yeah.
And I just don't think that there's a lot of smart people out there. And if you have to come up with an idea from scratch, you're pretty much saying that you're the smartest person and that there has been no one else that has ever thought of an idea that could solve this problem. And it's a lot harder of a road to go down. And so look around, be inspired by things that have no connection to what you're trying to solve, and see how you can solve that problem.
Yeah, I love that. I think that is a good transition point. I'd love to hear, based in this topic, right, of ideating, understanding your product, what are your 3 takeaways for entrepreneurs today?
My 3 takeaways for entrepreneurs. I think I'd probably recap what we've talked about in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
So let's rewind and recap what we've talked about. I think first thing would be is to become passionate about a disease that you want to find a cure for.
Yes.
And understand that really, really well. Feel empathy for that person that has that pain. Get to know them, and you will find great solutions, and you will find the passion to drive you through the hard times.
Yeah.
So I would say that's number 1. Number 2, I would, in terms of ideation, I would say leverage everything at your fingertips.
Okay, so with that, I think that's a good point. I'd love to hear your 3 takeaways for everyone today.
Yeah, so let's just recap what we talked about, and I think there's 3 things that we talked about that we could synthesize here. First would be really be passionate about the disease that you want to solve. Have empathy, get to know the problem so well that you're an expert in understanding that, whether it's an industry you're in or it's an industry you want to enter into. That is such a key piece to making sure that you find a good cure. Number 2,
not symptoms.
Disease, not symptoms. Thank you. That's perfect. Number 2 is make sure you build your team and understand how you can complement each other. Are you a generator or a synthesizer, right? If you are a generator, make sure you have a synthesizer that can execute. Don't be a wantrepreneur, be an entrepreneur, right? And then number 3 is leverage all of the people around you, internally, externally, customers. Look to the market, look out beyond the market and some of the great companies out there that have gone before you, and make sure that those are all sources of ideas. Throw all those ideas onto a canvas, and those are all your dots. And if the picture isn't clear of what your next step is or where you should move, you don't have enough dots. Get more dots, put them on the canvas, and then you execute. And then I have a bonus one for you.
Let's hear it.
the last one I would say is, if you are comfortable when you release your product, you waited too long.
Yes,
And
we have talked about that a lot. If you're not embarrassed,
right, you have to have a little bit of uncomfortableness of saying, I don't know what's ready. Well, that I think shows you that you've got some work to do. You're going to iterate, but you're going to iterate on customer feedback, which is going to lead you. I mean, it goes right back to the lean principles and being agile about business development or product development.
Yep. Amen. 100%. Okay.
All
well,
right.
Thanks again, Jon.
Thank you, Casey.
Thanks for listening to that episode of We've Connected. Make sure to hit subscribe down below so you get notified of any time we add a new episode. We'll catch you next time.